The morning air was crisp as Angelo turned the key to his small restaurant. The lock stuck, as it always did. He jiggled it twice, then pushed the heavy wooden door open with his shoulder. The familiar smell greeted him: garlic, basil, and the lingering scent of yesterday's tomato sauce. This place, Nana's Kitchen, had been his dream for nearly 15 years. Now it was becoming his nightmare. Angelo flipped on the lights and sighed at the empty tables. Just 5 years ago, people had waited in line for his homemade pasta. Today, he'd be lucky to fill half the restaurant. The fancy new places downtown with their trendy menus and celebrity chefs were stealing his customers one by one. Another day, another dollar, he mumbled to himself, hanging his worn jacket on the hook by the door. Maybe less than $1 today. He moved to the kitchen, his true sanctuary. The stainless steel counters gleamed under the fluorescent lights. At least he still took pride in keeping everything spotless. His father had taught him that. Cleanliness was next to godliness in a kitchen. Angelo tied his apron around his waist and began his morning ritual. First, the dough for fresh pasta. His hands worked from memory, cracking eggs into the well of flour, a pinch of salt, a drizzle of olive oil. As he kneaded, Angelo's mind wandered to the stack of bills waiting in his office drawer. The electricity notice had a red stamp this month. The food supplier had called twice yesterday, and his landlord wasn't known for patience. Focus on the food, he told himself. The rest will work itself out, but would it? Angelo had been telling himself that for months now. He'd cut staff until it was just him and Greta, his loyal server who'd been with him since opening day. He'd reduced the menu, eliminated the more expensive ingredients, even started closing on Mondays to save on utilities. Nothing seemed to stem the bleeding of his bank account. The morning prep work kept his hands busy, chopping onions and garlic, stirring the sauce that would simmer all day, rolling and cutting the pasta. By 11, everything was ready for lunch service. Angelo wiped his brow with a kitchen towel and peered out into the dining room just as Greta arrived. "Morning, boss," she said, hanging her purse beneath the hostess stand. Her smile never showed the worry that Angelo knew she must feel. Her hours had been cut too, but she never complained. "Feeling lucky today?" "Always," Angelo lied, forcing a smile. "Made fresh ravioli. Maybe that'll bring them in." Lunch was slow, just a handful of regulars and a couple of tourists who'd wandered in from the cold. Angelo watched through the kitchen window as his mostly empty restaurant mocked his efforts. Each plate he prepared was a work of love, the same recipes his grandmother had taught him back in the old country. Food that should have people lining up around the block. By mid-afternoon, the lunch crowd, if you could call it that, had cleared out. Angelo sat at the corner table going through receipts while Greta wiped down tables. "My nephew might stop by for dinner," Greta offered, trying to sound upbeat. "He's bringing a date. I'll make it special for them," Angelo promised. Any customer was precious now. The afternoon dragged on. Angelo prepared for dinner service with diminishing hope. The weather report mentioned rain, which would further reduce the chance of walk-ins. He checked his phone. No reservations had come through the online system. 2 years ago, he'd been booked solid weeks in advance. The rain started around 5, a steady downpour that drummed against the windows and swept leaves down the empty street. Angelo watched fat droplets race down the glass and tried not to see them as tears. His father would have scolded him for such thoughts. "Restaurateurs don't cry," he would have said. They adapt, but how much more could he adapt? The thought of closing Nonna's Kitchen felt like a knife to his heart. This restaurant was more than a business. It was his heritage, his family's legacy, his own identity wrapped up in pasta and sauce. The dinner service was marginally better than lunch. Greta's nephew did show up with his date, plus a few dedicated regulars who braved the weather. Angelo prepared each dish as if it were for a food critic, garnishing with extra care, tasting each sauce twice before sending it out. Pride was all he had left. By 9, the last customers were finishing their tiramisu. Angelo had already begun cleaning the kitchen when he heard a sound from the back door, the one that opened into the alley where they kept the dumpsters. Probably raccoons again, he thought. The creatures had become bolder lately. Or maybe he was just noticing them more as he stayed later, trying to save on ingredients by prepping everything himself. The sound came again, not the clatter of trash cans, but something softer. A whimper, maybe. Angelo frowned, wiped his hands, and moved toward the back door. Greta was totaling the register and didn't notice as he slipped out. The rain had softened to a drizzle, but the alley glistened wet under the single security light. Angelo looked left, then right. Nothing. He was about to go back inside when he heard it again. Definitely a whimper, followed by a hushing sound. Human sounds, hello? He called, peering into the shadows. Someone there? Silence followed, then a small movement behind the dumpster. Angelo stepped closer, cautious but curious. What he saw made his heart sink. A woman and a boy, huddled together under a makeshift shelter of flattened cardboard boxes. They were soaked despite their efforts to stay dry. The woman had her arm around the boy, no more than 7 or 8 years old, trying to shield him from both the rain and Angelo's gaze. Their few belongings were stuffed into a worn backpack beside them. "I'm sorry," the woman said quickly, her voice hoarse. "We'll move on. We didn't think anyone would come out here so late." The boy looked up at Angelo with wide, frightened eyes, then buried his face against his mother's side. They were both thin, too thin, and shivering in the damp autumn air. Angelo stood frozen, his own trouble suddenly seeming smaller in comparison. Here he was worrying about keeping his restaurant while these two didn't even have a roof over their heads. "It's pouring," Angelo said finally. "You shouldn't be out in this." "We're fine," the woman insisted, though everything about them suggested otherwise. Her hair was plastered to her face and the boy's shoes were soaked through. "We don't want any trouble." Angelo thought of the empty restaurant, the warm kitchen, the leftover food he'd been planning to take home. His grandmother's voice seemed to whisper in his ear. "Food is love, Angelo. We never turn away the hungry. I have food inside," he said, gesturing toward the back door. "And it's dry. You could come in just until the rain stops." The woman hesitated, suspicion clear on her face. The boy whispered something to her and she bent to listen. Angelo couldn't hear what was said, but he saw the battle of pride and necessity playing across her features. "I'm Angelo," he offered, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. "That's my restaurant. I was about to throw out the day's leftovers, but they're still good. Better than good, actually." At the mention of food, the boy looked up again, hope flickering in his eyes. The woman noticed it too and seemed to make a decision. "I'm Lily," she said, standing slowly and helping the boy to his feet. "This is my son, Pete." Angelo nodded, relieved. "Come inside, Lily and Pete. Let's get you dried off and fed." He held the door open as they gathered their meager belongings. The woman kept her arm protectively around her son as they cautiously followed Angelo into the warm kitchen. They stood awkwardly just inside the door, dripping onto the clean floor, looking ready to flee at any moment. Greta appeared from the dining room, surprise registering on her face. "Angelo? Who's this?" "Guess," Angelo said simply. "Can you grab some clean towels from the storage closet?" As Greta hurried off, Angelo turned to the stove. "Sit down," he told them, gesturing to the small table in the corner where staff sometimes ate their meals. "I'll warm up some food." They sat gingerly on the edge of the chairs as if afraid to get them wet or dirty. The boy, Pete, looked around the kitchen with wide-eyed wonder. Maybe he'd never been inside a restaurant kitchen before, Angelo thought. Within minutes, Angelo had plates of pasta, garlic bread, and salad in front of them. The boy stared at the food as if it might disappear. The woman, Lily, looked up at Angelo with a mixture of gratitude and shame. "Thank you," she whispered. "We can't pay you, but—" Angelo waved her words away. "Eat. Food is meant to be shared." As they ate, slowly at first, then with increasing eagerness, Angelo felt something shift inside him. His restaurant might be failing, his dreams crumbling, but he could still do this. He could still feed people. He could still spread a little kindness in a world that had lately seemed unkind. Later, as the rain continued to fall and Angelo made up beds of sorts from tablecloths and napkins in the dry storage room, he wondered what tomorrow would bring. For him, for these unexpected guests, it for his struggling restaurant. One thing was certain, tonight had changed something. Whether it was for better or worse remained to be seen. What Angelo didn't know, as he finally locked up and headed home to his empty apartment, was that this chance encounter in the rain would be the first domino in a chain of events that would transform not just his business, but his entire life. Angelo arrived at Nonna's kitchen earlier than usual the next morning. The events of last night had left him restless, thoughts of the woman and her son keeping him awake well past midnight. He'd tossed and turned, wondering if letting strangers stay in his restaurant had been foolish or kind. Possibly both. The lock still stuck. He jiggled the key twice, pushed with his shoulder, and stepped inside. Immediately, he noticed something different. The air smelled of coffee and... was that bread baking? He hurried toward the kitchen, both curious and concerned. What he found stopped him in his tracks. Lily stood at the counter, flour dusting her hands and forearms. Several loaves of golden bread cooled on racks while another batch baked in the oven. Pete sat at the small corner table, carefully folding napkins into neat triangles. "Good morning," Lily said, looking up with uncertainty in her eyes. "I hope this is okay. I wanted to thank you somehow, and baking is, well, it's what I know." Angelo breathed in the rich aroma. The bread looked professional, better than what he normally served. "Where did you get the ingredients?" he asked, moving closer to examine her work. "Only used what was about to expire," she explained quickly. "I checked all the dates, and I wrote down exactly what I used so I could pay you back somehow." Pete looked up from his napkin folding. "Mom makes the best bread ever. She used to do it for work." Angelo picked up one of the cooling loaves. It had a perfect crust crackling slightly under his fingers, still warm from the oven. He broke it open, watching the steam rise. The texture inside was exactly what every baker strives for, airy yet substantial. He took a bite and couldn't help the small sound of appreciation that escaped him. "This is incredible," he said honestly. "Better than what I've been buying from the bakery downtown." Relief washed over Lily's face. "It's a sourdough starter I've been carrying with me for months. Couldn't bear to leave it behind when things changed for us. I feed it whenever I can." The fact that she'd maintained a sourdough starter while homeless struck Angelo deeply. It spoke of hope, of hanging on to skills and passion even when everything else was lost. "You said you did this professionally?" he asked, taking another bite. Lily nodded, turning back to the dough she was kneading. "I was the head baker at the Golden Crust for nearly 6 years, before everything fell apart." Angelo knew the Golden Crust. It was an upscale bakery across town that supplied several fancy restaurants with bread and pastries. The kind of place that had a waiting list for special orders. "What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" Lily's hand stilled for a moment. Pete looked down at the napkin, suddenly very interested in his folding work. "My husband left," she said quietly. "He gambled, a lot. I didn't know how bad it was until he disappeared and the debt collectors started showing up. They took everything. The apartment, the car, my savings, all gone. I tried staying with friends, but you can only impose for so long. We've been on our own for about 4 months now." Angelo leaned against the counter, the bread still in his hand. 4 months on the streets with a child. He couldn't imagine it. "Pete's school thinks we're staying with my sister in another district," Lily continued, her voice dropping so the boy wouldn't hear. "If they knew we were homeless, they'd call social services. I can't lose him too." The fear in her eyes was raw and real. Angelo understood it immediately. The terror of losing the one thing that matters most. For her, it was her son. For him, it had been this restaurant, though now that comparison felt shallow. "Mom's really good at making stuff," Pete piped up, clearly trying to steer the conversation to happier territory. "She can make fancy cakes and cookies and stuff with decorations. She made my birthday cake look like a rocket ship last year." Lily smiled at her son, love and sadness mingling in her expression. "That was when we had an oven," she reminded him gently. Angelo looked around his kitchen, then at the remarkable bread, then at this woman who had held onto her craft through unimaginable hardship. An idea began to form in his mind, a crazy, possibly terrible idea that could either save his restaurant or sink it faster. "I need help in the kitchen," he said, the words coming out before he could second-guess himself. "My budget's tight, but I can offer meals and a safe place to sleep. And maybe a small wage as things improve." Lily's eyes widened. "You don't even know me." "I know your bread," Angelo replied, holding up the loaf. "And my grandmother always said you can tell a person's heart by how they bake." This bread was made with care. Pete bounced in his chair. "Mom, does that mean we get to stay in a real building?" Lily looked torn. "I don't need charity," she said quietly to Angelo. "It's not charity. It's business," he insisted. "Look, I'll be honest with you. This place is struggling. I've been losing customers to the fancy new spots downtown. Maybe what I need is something different, something special that they don't have, like homemade bread that tastes like this." He let the idea hang in the air between them as Greta arrived, stopping in surprise at the kitchen doorway. "Something smells amazing," she said, sniffing appreciatively. "Did you change bread suppliers?" Angelo smiled. "Meet our new baker," he said, gesturing to Lily. "And her assistant," he added, nodding toward Pete. The look of shock on Lily's face slowly transformed into cautious hope. "I can't promise anything," she warned. "But I can try. For a trial period, maybe?" By lunchtime, word had somehow spread about the fresh bread at Nonna's kitchen. Angelo had placed some loaves in the window, and the aroma drifting into the street had drawn in several curious customers. The lunch service was nearly twice as busy as it had been in weeks. "The bread is incredible," one regular told Angelo as he paid his bill. "Reminds me of my trip to Italy last year. You changing things up around here?" Angelo glanced toward the kitchen, where Lily was already preparing more dough for the dinner service, her movements confident and precise. "Just getting back to basics," he answered. "Good food made with care." Throughout the afternoon, Angelo observed Lily's work. She was methodical, organized, and surprisingly fast. When he mentioned that a few of his pasta dishes came with a garlic herb roll, she immediately started experimenting, creating a version that complemented his recipes perfectly. Pete stayed out of the way, settling in a corner with some paper and colored pencils Greta had found in the office. He drew pictures of rockets and dogs and what appeared to be a house with all of them standing in front: Angelo, Greta, his mom, and himself. The inclusion made Angelo's throat tight with unexpected emotion. When the dinner service began, the restaurant was nearly full. Angelo worked alongside Lily in the kitchen, their movements falling into a natural rhythm. She anticipated what he needed before he asked, sliding ingredients his way, offering suggestions in a tentative voice that grew more confident when he actually listened. "If you add a pinch of nutmeg to that cream sauce, it'll bring out the flavors," she suggested at one point. Angelo tried it, and she was right. It was better. By closing time, they were both exhausted but riding a wave of unexpected success. Greta counted the day's take with raised eyebrows. "Best Thursday we've had in months," she announced. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." After Greta left, Angelo showed Lily and Pete to the storage room, which he'd improved with a small space heater and some proper bedding he'd brought from home. "It's not much," he apologized, "but it's warm and safe." "It's perfect," Lily said quietly, watching as Pete immediately curled up on the makeshift bed, exhaustion claiming him within minutes. "Thank you." Angelo shifted uncomfortably under her grateful gaze. "Thank you for the bread. And for staying." The next few days fell into a pattern. Angelo would arrive to find Lily already at work, bread baking, new ideas taking shape under her skilled hands. Pete would help where he could, then settle with his drawings or homework. Greta took a shine to the boy, teaching him how to refill water glasses and fold fancy napkins when the restaurant was quiet. The customers noticed the changes. The fresh bread became a talking point, with people specifically requesting extra to take home. Angelo added a few new items to the menu, simple things that showcased Lily's baking skills. A rustic tart for dessert, a bread bowl for his grandmother's soup recipe, small tweaks that made familiar dishes feel new again. A week after Lily and Pete had appeared in his alley, Angelo sat at the corner table after closing, going through the receipts. For the first time in months, the numbers didn't make him wince. They weren't great yet, but they were better. Definitely better. Lily joined him, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron, an old one of his that she'd taken to wearing. "I had an idea," she said hesitantly. "For Sunday brunch? A lot of restaurants around here do it, but maybe we could offer something different. Traditional Italian breakfast pastries, maybe. I found some recipes in that old cookbook on your shelf." The cookbook had been his grandmother's. Angelo hadn't opened it in years, sticking to the recipes he knew by heart. "You think people would come for breakfast?" he asked, considering it. The restaurant was always closed Sunday mornings. "I think they'd come for something they can't get anywhere else," Lily replied. "Something authentic." Angelo studied her face, less drawn now after a week of regular meals and safe sleep. There was color in her cheeks and a spark of creative energy in her eyes that probably hadn't been there for months. In her, he recognized something he'd been missing in himself lately: passion for the work, joy in feeding others. "Let's try it," he decided. "This Sunday. We'll start small, see how it goes." Lily's smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds. "You won't regret it," she promised. "I have so many ideas." As she hurried back to the kitchen to write down her plans, Angelo watched her go, wondering at the strange turn his life had taken. A week ago, he'd been a failing restaurant owner on the verge of losing everything. Now he was still struggling, yes, but not alone anymore. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. What he didn't know yet was how much more would change in the weeks to come, or how this unlikely partnership would transform not just his business but his entire life. Sunday morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the windows of Nonna's kitchen. Angelo had come in at 5, expecting to be the first one there. He wasn't. Lily had somehow beaten him, arriving at 4:30 with Pete still half asleep on a chair nearby, wrapped in a blanket. The kitchen was already alive with activity, dough rising in bowls, the ovens preheating, and the rich smell of coffee filling the air. Lily moved with purpose, her hands dusted with flour, her face showing concentration rather than the constant worry Angelo had first seen in her eyes. "You should have woken me," Angelo said, hanging up his jacket. "I could have helped earlier," Lily shook her head. "Couldn't sleep anyway. Too many ideas." She gestured to a notebook on the counter, filled with her neat handwriting and small sketches of pastries. "I wanted to try these traditional Italian breakfast pastries from your grandmother's cookbook, and maybe some of my own creations too." Angelo peeked under a cloth covering a tray. Perfectly formed cornetti, the Italian version of croissants, sat ready to be baked. Another tray held what looked like sfogliatelle, the shell-shaped pastries filled with orange-scented ricotta that his grandmother had made for special occasions. "You did all this already?" he asked, impressed. Lily smiled, a hint of pride breaking through her usual caution. "I work fast when I'm excited. Used to drive my old boss crazy, always wanting to try new recipes when we had orders to fill." By 7 o'clock, the small tables in Nonna's kitchen had been rearranged for brunch service. Greta arrived, eyebrows rising at the transformation. Angelo had put up a handwritten sign in the window. "Sunday Italian breakfast, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. "You think anyone will come?" Greta asked, arranging flowers in small vases on each table. Angelo had splurged on them. Another suggestion from Lily. "We posted it on the restaurant's social page," Angelo replied, and Lily said a few customers from Friday night mentioned they'd stop by. At 5 minutes to 8, Angelo peeked out the front window. His heart sank. The street was empty, not a customer in sight. Maybe this had been a mistake. Maybe. A couple appeared around the corner, then another. A small family with 2 children crossed the street heading toward the restaurant. By 8:15, every table was full and people were waiting outside. "I've never seen it this busy," Greta whispered to Angelo as she rushed past with a tray of cappuccinos. Not even in the good old days. Angelo stood in the doorway between the dining room and kitchen, watching in amazement as people exclaimed over Lily's creations. The sfogliatelle were a particular hit, with their crisp layers and sweet filling. Many customers took photos of their food, something that had rarely happened at Nonna's kitchen before. In the kitchen, Lily worked steadily, her face flushed from the heat of the ovens and from excitement. Pete had been enlisted to help, carefully placing pastries on serving plates and beaming with pride when Angelo praised his work. When the last customer finally left around 1 o'clock, the entire staff, all 3 of them plus Pete, collapsed into chairs, exhausted but elated. "That was," Angelo began, but couldn't find the words. "Amazing," Greta finished for him. "When are we doing it again?" "Next Sunday," Lily suggested hesitantly, looking to Angelo for approval. He nodded, still processing what had happened. Not only had they been packed for hours, but they'd also sold out of everything, and the comments from customers had been glowing. People already asking about next week, wanting to know if certain pastries would be available again. As Greta left to enjoy the rest of her Sunday, Angelo sat with Lily and Pete at one of the small tables, sharing the last pot of coffee and a slightly imperfect cornetto that Lily had set aside. "We should talk," Angelo said, his tone serious enough that Lily's smile faded. "Was something wrong?" she asked immediately. "I know the maritozzi weren't quite right." "The cream was—" "Nothing was wrong," Angelo interrupted. "Everything was perfect. That's what I want to talk about." He took a deep breath, considering his words carefully. What he was about to propose was risky, possibly foolish from a business perspective, but something inside him had shifted over these past days. "I'd like to offer you a real job," he said. "Not just meals and a place to stay. An actual position as the head baker here, with a proper salary." Lily's eyes widened. "But you said business was struggling." Can you afford that? After today? I think I can't afford not to. Angelo pushed a piece of paper across the table, figures he'd worked out while watching the packed dining room. This is what I can offer right now. It's not what you deserve, but it's a start, and a percentage of the pastry sales, too. Lily looked at the number, her expression unreadable. Pete fidgeted in his chair, sensing the importance of the moment without fully understanding it. There's more, Angelo continued when she didn't speak. The apartment above the restaurant. It's small, just one bedroom and a living area with a tiny kitchen. It's been empty since my uncle moved to Florida 2 years ago. It needs some work, but it would be a real home for you and Pete. Rent would be part of your compensation package. Now tears filled Lily's eyes. She blinked them back quickly, glancing at Pete, who was watching her closely. I can't accept all this, she whispered. It's too much. It's not charity, Angelo insisted, echoing what he'd said that first morning. It's business. Good business. Your pastries just brought in more customers than I've had in months. People were talking about coming back, about telling their friends. He leaned forward. This place needed something new, something special. And that's you. Pete tugged at his mother's sleeve. Does this mean we'd live upstairs? In a real place with beds and a bathroom and everything? The hope in the boy's voice seemed to affect Lily more than anything else. Angela watched as her resistance crumbled. We could try, she said cautiously. But I want a trial period. 3 months. If it's not working out for either of us, we can reconsider. Angelo stuck out his hand. Deal. Later that afternoon, Angelo showed them the apartment. It was dusty and bare bones. His uncle had taken most of the furniture when he moved. But the possibilities were obvious. Large windows let in plenty of light. The kitchen was outdated but functional. The bathroom needed new fixtures, but the water ran clear and hot. Pete ran from room to room, his excitement palpable. I could have my own space here, he said, pointing to a small alcove off the living area. For my drawings and stuff, we'll get you a desk, Angelo promised before he could stop himself. The way the boy's face lit up made any expense seem worthwhile. Lily stood in the center of the main room, her arms wrapped around herself as if she couldn't quite believe what was happening. 3 months, she reminded Angelo. Then we'll see. The next week brought a flurry of activity. Angelo's friend Tony, who worked in construction, came by to fix up the apartment, patching walls, updating the bathroom, adding a fresh coat of paint throughout. Angelo found some furniture in storage, pieces his grandmother had kept that he'd never had space for in his own small apartment. Word about the Sunday brunch spread rapidly. The restaurant's social media following tripled after people posted photos of Lily's creations. Several food bloggers stopped by, writing rave reviews about the authentic Italian pastries, just like you'd find in Rome or Florence. But success brought complications too. On Wednesday evening, as Angelo was going over the books in his small office, his phone rang. It was Hal, his accountant. I'm looking at your recent transactions, Hal said without preamble. What's going on, Angelo? You've increased food orders by 30%, hired new staff, and you're suddenly spending on building materials. Did you win the lottery and not tell me? Angelo explained about Lily and the successful brunch service, about his plans to gradually expand the pastry offerings to other days. Let me get this straight, Hal said, his voice rising. You hired a homeless woman you met in an alley? With no references, no background check, and you're letting her live in your property? Have you lost your mind? She's a professional baker, Angelo defended. She worked at the Golden Crust for years. And why isn't she still there? Why was she homeless? Did you even ask? Hal's tone was cutting. Look, I'm your accountant, not your life coach. But this sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. You're barely keeping afloat as it is. 1 bad month and you could lose everything. After hanging up, Angelo sat motionless, Hal's words echoing in his mind. Was this all a terrible mistake? He'd been so caught up in the excitement of something new, in the joy of seeing his restaurant full again, that he'd ignored the very real risks. Footsteps in the doorway made him look up. Lily stood there, a small plate in her hands. I was experimenting with a new filling for tomorrow, she said, offering him what looked like a miniature tart, roasted pear with honey and a touch of rosemary. Angelo took a bite. The flavors melded perfectly, sweet, herbaceous, with a hint of caramelization from the roasted fruit. It was exquisite. What's wrong? Lily asked, noticing his expression. Too much rosemary? No, it's perfect, Angelo assured her. Just Accountant troubles. Nothing to worry about, but Lily wasn't fooled. She pulled up the spare chair and sat across from him. Is it about me? About the money you're spending? Angelo sighed. Hal thinks I'm taking too big a risk, that I don't know enough about you to stake the restaurant's future on this. Lily was quiet for a long moment. He's not wrong, she finally said. You don't know me well. I could be anyone. I know what matters, Angelo replied. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you care about quality. I know you're a good mother who would do anything for her son. He met her eyes. The rest is just details. Something changed in Lily's expression then. A softening, a lowering of defenses. No one's believed in me like this in a very long time, she said quietly. Not since before Pete was born. Well, get used to it, Angelo told her with a small smile. Because I'm not stopping now. As they sat together in the tiny office, surrounded by paperwork and the lingering scent of rosemary and honey, Angelo knew that despite Hal's warnings, he was making the right choice. Some risks were worth taking, and sometimes the most unexpected encounters could lead to the most remarkable opportunities. The transformation of Nonna's kitchen happened so gradually that Angelo almost missed it, like watching a child grow day by day. It wasn't until a food writer from the city's most popular blog showed up unannounced that he truly realized how far they had come. I've been hearing buzz about this place for weeks, the writer said, snapping photos of her cannoli with her phone. Everyone's talking about your Italian pastries. They say it's the most authentic in the city. Angelo glanced toward the kitchen where Lily was working, completely unaware of their important visitor. It had been 6 weeks since that first Sunday brunch, and what had started as a desperate experiment had evolved into something remarkable. The writer took another bite, closing her eyes in appreciation. This is exceptional. Who's your pastry chef? Did you poach someone from one of those fancy downtown restaurants? Pride swelled in Angelo's chest. She found me, actually. Best thing that ever happened to this place. After the writer left, promising a feature in next week's blog, Angelo retreated to his office. The stack of bills that had once threatened to drown him had shrunk considerably. They weren't rich by any means, but the constant knot of financial worry in his stomach had loosened. Sunday brunches were now standing room only, with lines forming before they opened. Lily's pastries were also available every day now, displayed in a small case by the front counter, often selling out before noon. The apartment upstairs had transformed too. Angelo had spent evenings and his one day off helping Lily and Pete make it into a real home. Fresh paint in warm colors, curtains sewn by Greta from fabric she found on sale, a proper bed for Pete with a desk nearby for his schoolwork, small touches that made the bare space into something welcoming. Angelo looked up as Lily appeared in his office doorway, flour dusting her dark hair. She wore an actual chef's coat now. Angelo had insisted on ordering it with Nonna's kitchen embroidered over the pocket. The food writer wants to do a whole feature, Angelo told her. About you and your pastries. Lily's eyes widened with alarm. About me? I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? It would be great publicity. She bit her lip, coming into the office and closing the door behind her. There are complications. My ex-husband, Pete's father. If he sees it, Angelo understood immediately. You're worried he might find you, she nodded, sinking into the chair across from him. He hasn't made any effort to see Pete in over a year, but he might come around if he thinks there's money involved. Her hands twisted in her lap. He wasn't a good father or husband. He could be unpredictable. The protective instinct that rose in Angelo surprised him with its intensity. We don't have to use your name, he assured her. We can just talk about the food, the restaurant. Relief softened her features. Thank you. I'm sorry to be difficult, especially after everything you've done for us. You're not being difficult. You're being a good mother. Angelo hesitated, then added, and you've done just as much for me. More probably. This place was dying before you came along. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. These quiet conversations had become a part of their routine. A few minutes stolen at the end of the day to talk about the restaurant, new recipe ideas, or sometimes just to enjoy a moment of peace together. Pete's teacher called today, Lily said, changing the subject. He's doing much better in school. She said his whole demeanor has changed. He's participating more, making friends. That's great, Angelo replied, genuinely pleased. He'd grown fond of the boy who now spent afternoons at the restaurant after school. doing homework at a corner table or helping with simple tasks in the kitchen. Maybe it's time to think about enrolling him officially in the school here, since you're planning to stay. The words hung between them, a question disguised as a statement. The 3-month trial period was nearly up. Lily met his eyes. We are staying, if you still want us to. I do, Angelo said, perhaps too quickly. The restaurant needs you, he paused. I need you. He hadn't meant to say that last part aloud. The slight widening of Lily's eyes told him she'd caught it too. Before either could address it, the door burst open and Pete rushed in, backpack still on his shoulders. Mom, Angelo, look what I got on my science project. He thrust a paper toward them, an A+ prominently displayed at the top, along with a note from the teacher. Outstanding work. Best in class. The moment between Angelo and Lily passed as they both turned their attention to Pete's achievement. But something had shifted, something neither was quite ready to name. The food blog feature came out the following Tuesday. The writer had respected their wishes, focusing on the food and the restaurant's history rather than Lily's personal story. The headline read, Hidden Gem. This neighborhood Italian spot is serving up pastries that will transport you straight to Naples. The effect was immediate. By Wednesday, the line for Lily's pastries stretched out the door. By Friday, they had completely sold out of everything by early afternoon. Angelo hired 2 part-time assistants to help Lily keep up with demand, and they extended their hours to include early mornings for coffee and pastries. We need more space, Angelo admitted as they cleaned up after a particularly busy Saturday night. The kitchen wasn't designed for this much baking alongside regular meal prep. Maybe we could rearrange things, Lily suggested. Move some equipment around? Angelo shook his head. I've been thinking bigger. The storefront next door has been empty for months. I talked to the landlord yesterday about possibly expanding. Lily stared at him. Expanding? That would be a huge step. A huge opportunity, Angelo countered. We could have a proper bakery section. Display cases for your creations. More seating for customers. But the cost, I've been running the numbers with Hal. Angelo smiled at her surprise. Yes, even my skeptical accountant is on board now. With the way business has been growing, he thinks we could manage it. It would be tight for a while, but doable. The idea hung between them, exciting but intimidating. Growth meant risk, but it also meant possibility. What do you think? Angelo asked when Lily remained quiet. She looked around the kitchen that had become her domain, at the walls that suddenly seemed too confining for their success. I think we should do it. The words had barely left her mouth when the front bell chimed. Angelo frowned. They had closed an hour ago and the door should have been locked. I'll check, he said, heading to the dining room. A man stood just inside the entrance, swaying slightly. His clothes were rumpled, his face unshaven. There was something vaguely familiar about him, though Angelo was certain he wasn't a regular customer. We're closed, Angelo said firmly. We open again tomorrow at 10. The man ignored him, peering past him toward the kitchen. Is Lily here? I know she's here. Angelo felt a chill run through him. There's no one here by that name. You need to leave. Don't lie to me, the man snapped, his words slurring slightly. I saw the article. I know this is her bread, her pastries. Those are her rosemary tarts. He jabbed a finger toward a photo on the wall, a recent edition showcasing some of their popular items. No one makes them like that except Lily. Before Angelo could respond, Lily herself appeared in the doorway behind him. She froze, her face draining of color. Vincent, she whispered. The man's face twisted into an unpleasant smile. There you are, playing house with your new boyfriend while I've been looking everywhere for you. Angelo stepped instinctively between them. You need to leave. Now. Vincent ignored him completely, his bloodshot eyes fixed on Lily. You look good. Must be nice having a roof over your head. Meanwhile, I've got debt collectors breathing down my neck. That's not my problem anymore, Lily said, her voice stronger than Angelo expected. You made your choices. Where's my son? Vincent demanded, attempting to look past them toward the kitchen. Pete, you in there, buddy? Dad's here. He's not here, Lily said quickly. And he's not your buddy. You haven't seen him in over a year. Vincent's face darkened. He's my kid. I have rights. Rights you gave up when you gambled away our home and disappeared, Lily shot back. Please leave, Vincent. You're drunk. Not until I get what I came for. Vincent stepped closer, his stance aggressive. I know you're making money now. I deserve a cut. For Pete's future, Angelo had heard enough. He pulled out his phone. Leave now, or I'm calling the police. For a tense moment, Vincent seemed ready to escalate the situation. Then, with a final glare at Lily, he backed toward the door. This isn't over. I'll be back when you're ready to be reasonable. After he stumbled out, Angelo locked the door and pulled down the blinds. When he turned around, Lily was leaning against the wall, shaking. I knew this would happen, she whispered. I knew he'd find us eventually. Angelo guided her to a chair and sat beside her. Has he ever been violent? Not physically. But he has a temper, especially when he's drinking. Her hands trembled as she pushed her hair back from her face. He won't give up easily. Not if he thinks there's money involved. We'll get a restraining order, Angelo said firmly. First thing tomorrow. And I'm installing security cameras outside. What if he tries to take Pete? He's still his father. A father who abandoned his son for over a year? Angelo shook his head. No judge would side with him. We'll talk to a lawyer. Make sure everything is done properly. Lily looked up at him, fear and gratitude mingling in her eyes. We? Angelo took her hand without thinking. Yes, we. You're not alone in this, Lily, not anymore. Something passed between them then, an understanding, a promise. They had begun as strangers thrown together by circumstance, become business partners out of necessity. And now, something more. Something neither had expected but both had come to rely on. I should check on Pete, Lily said softly. The boy was upstairs in the apartment, likely already asleep. I'll come with you, Angelo offered, just to make sure everything's secure. As they climbed the stairs together, Angelo realized that what had started as a simple act of kindness on a rainy night had become the foundation of something far more meaningful. They had created not just a successful business but a family of sorts, unconventional, unexpected, but no less real for it. Vincent's unwelcome appearance was a harsh reminder of the past, but as Angelo watched Lily gently check on her sleeping son, he made a silent promise that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The restaurant wasn't the only thing that had been saved these past months. They had all been transformed by finding each other when they needed it most. 2 years could change everything. Angelo realized this as he stood in the newly expanded Nonna's kitchen, watching the morning sunlight stream through the large front windows. Where once there had been a struggling restaurant barely hanging on, there was now a thriving business that had become the heart of the neighborhood. The expansion into the space next door had been completed a year ago, transforming the restaurant into 2 connected but distinct sections. The original dining area still served Angelo's Italian dishes for lunch and dinner, while the new space had become Lily's bakery, with glass display cases showcasing her now famous pastries and comfortable seating for morning customers. Angelo moved through the bakery, straightening chairs and adjusting the fresh flowers on each table. In an hour, the doors would open and the usual morning rush would begin. Locals stopping for coffee and breakfast pastries, tourists who had read about them in travel guides, and regulars who came as much for the warm atmosphere as for the food. Pete's artwork hung on the walls. His talent had blossomed over the past 2 years, and his colorful interpretations of Italian landscapes and city scenes had become part of the restaurant's charm. At 12 years old now, he helped out on weekends, proudly wearing his own apron with the restaurant's logo embroidered on the pocket. The kitchen door swung open, and Lily emerged with a tray of fresh cornetti, the buttery scent filling the air. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, a few loose strands framing her face. The haunted look that had once shadowed her eyes was long gone, replaced by quiet confidence and contentment. "Good morning," she said, sliding the tray into one of the display cases. "You're here early." "Big day," Angelo reminded her. "The reporter from Food and Travel magazine is coming at 2. And the photographer." Lily nodded, arranging the pastries with practiced precision. "Pete's excited about it. He's already picked out which shirt he wants to wear for the photos." Angelo smiled, thinking of how much the boy had grown. No longer the quiet, scared child he'd first met huddled behind a dumpster. Pete had become a lively, creative kid with a wide circle of friends and excellent grades. The school in their neighborhood had an arts program that nurtured his talent, and his teachers regularly commented on his potential. "Did you finish the special menu for the charity dinner?" Lily asked, moving to the coffee machine to begin the morning setup. "Almost. Just need your input on the dessert options." The charity dinner had become an annual event, their way of giving back. Once a year, they closed the restaurant to regular customers and hosted a fundraising dinner for the local homeless shelter. The money raised went to programs helping families get back on their feet, providing job training and transitional housing. It had been Lily's idea, a way to help others who were in the situation she had once faced. Angelo had embraced it wholeheartedly, and over the past 2 years, they'd raised enough money to help the shelter expand its services significantly. The bell on the door jingled, and Greta walked in, followed by their small staff of servers and kitchen helpers. Once just 3 people struggling to keep a restaurant alive, they now employed a team of 12, many of whom had come from the shelter's job training program. "Morning, bosses," Greta called cheerfully. Her role had expanded too. She now managed the front of house for both the restaurant and bakery, handling scheduling and training for all the serving staff. "Ready for the magazine, people?" "As ready as we'll ever be," Angelo replied. As the staff began their morning routines, Angelo retreated to the office he now shared with Lily. Photos crowded the walls. Pete at his first art show, the ribbon-cutting ceremony when they expanded, the whole staff at last year's charity dinner, memories of how far they'd come. Lily joined him a few minutes later, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Nervous about the interview?" she asked, setting 1 cup on his desk. "A little," he admitted. "It's a big magazine, national distribution. Just tell our story," she said simply. "It's a good one, our story." The phrase warmed him in a way that had become familiar. Their story had indeed grown into something neither could have imagined that rainy night 2 years ago. The struggling restaurant owner and the homeless mother and son had saved each other, creating something meaningful together. "Have you heard anything from Vincent lately?" Angelo asked, the question that still came up periodically, though less frequently as time passed. Lily shook her head. "Not since the court finalized the custody arrangement 6 months ago." Her ex-husband had fought briefly for visitation rights after reappearing in their lives. But his continued problems with alcohol and gambling had made the case straightforward. The judge had granted Lily full custody, with Vincent allowed only supervised visits, which he had yet to actually schedule. "I think he's moved to the coast." That's what his mother told Pete during their phone call last month. The confrontation with Vincent had been one of their most difficult challenges, but facing it together had only strengthened their bond. Angelo had stood beside Lily through every court appearance, every tense encounter. His unwavering support had shown her what a true partner should be. They worked together through the morning rush, moving in the synchronized rhythm they had perfected over 2 years of side-by-side work. Angelo helping in the bakery section when needed, Lily stepping in to taste and adjust his sauce recipes. They had learned each other's strengths and weaknesses, becoming better together than they had ever been separately. At noon, Angelo closed the bakery section to prepare for the magazine interview. Pete arrived from school, bursting through the door with his usual energy. "Is the famous magazine lady here yet?" he asked, dropping his backpack on a chair. "Not for another 2 hours, Lily told him, straightening his rump. Lead shirt collar. "Plenty of time for you to do your homework first." Pete groaned but complied, settling at his usual corner table with his books. Angelo watched the interaction with a smile. The bond between mother and son had always been strong, but seeing them both thrive instead of just survive filled him with pride. When the reporter arrived, a stylishly dressed woman with a notepad and recorder, accompanied by a photographer carrying several equipment bags, Angelo felt surprisingly calm. This was their story to tell, and he was proud of every chapter. The interview took place at a table in the dining room, the photographer occasionally interrupting to capture images of the 3 of them together, of the restaurant space, of signature dishes brought out by the kitchen staff. "So," the reporter said, looking between Angelo and Lily, "tell me how this partnership began." The press materials mentioned something about a chance encounter. Angelo glanced at Lily, who nodded slightly. They had decided long ago to be honest about their story, though they kept certain details private. "I found Lily and Pete sheltering behind the restaurant during a rainstorm," Angelo explained. "At the time, my business was struggling badly. I offered them a meal and a dry place to stay for the night. I was a professional baker who had lost everything," Lily continued. "Angelo gave me a chance to use my skills again when no one else would. He saw value in me when I'd forgotten my own worth. And now you're co-owners of one of the city's most beloved culinary destinations, the reporter noted, scribbling in her notebook. Quite a journey. We help each other, Pete chimed in with the straightforward wisdom of children. That's what family does. The word family hung in the air, significant and true in a way that traditional definitions couldn't capture. They had become a family, not through birth or marriage, but through choice and circumstance and the daily decision to stand by one another. After the interview, as the photographer set up for final shots in the kitchen, Angelo found himself alone with Lily for a moment in the hallway between the restaurant and bakery sections. Pete called us a family, he said quietly. In front of the reporter, Lily's smile was gentle. Is that okay? More than okay. Angelo took her hand, an increasingly common gesture between them. It made me realize I've been waiting too long to ask you something. Her eyes widened slightly as she understood his meaning. Angelo, not a proposal. Not yet, he assured her, though they both knew that was the direction they were heading. Just permission to think about it. To plan for a future where what Pete said is official in every way. Lily's fingers tightened around his. I think we've been heading there for a while now, she admitted. Just taking our time. Taking our time is good, Angelo agreed. We have plenty of it now. The photographer called for them, breaking the moment. But the understanding remained between them, a promise of more to come, in their own time. Later that evening, after the magazine crew had left and the dinner service was underway, Angelo found himself in the kitchen doorway, watching the busy restaurant with a sense of wonder. Every table was full. Laughter and conversation filled the air. The staff moved efficiently between tables, Greta directing everything with practiced ease. In the kitchen behind him, Lily was putting the finishing touches on a tray of desserts, Pete helping by adding mint leaves to each plate. They worked together with the easy comfort of people who belonged with each other. 2 years ago, Angelo had been a man on the verge of losing everything he cared about. His restaurant had been failing, his dream dying. A chance encounter in the rain, an act of kindness that had cost him nothing, but meant everything, had changed the entire course of his life. The homeless mother and son he had helped had given him far more than he had ever given them. Together, they had not only saved his restaurant, but had transformed it into something better than he had ever imagined. More importantly, they had created a family, unconventional perhaps, but bound by choice and love and shared dreams. Order up, Lily called, breaking into his thoughts. She smiled at him as he turned, a smile that held the promise of all the days to come. Ready? Angelo nodded, stepping back into the kitchen, back into the heart of the life they had built together. Ready?